Winnipeg is back in the big leagues and over the moon.
Welcome to the Landing Strip with Nick Lynham and Mikey Garcia, presented by From Financial.
Live.
Welcome back to the Landing Strip, presented by From Financial. For one last kick at the old can here, we got locker room cleanup. The Western Conference Finals is about to begin. A game I'm sure all of us wish we were watching with the Winnipeg Jets playing it. But here we are to talk about the Winnipeg Jets season. Mikey, how you doing, buddy?
I've had some time to step away now, right, after the hurt of the loss that night, and had the chance to listen to the exit interviews and things like that. So, you know, it's bittersweet that we're at the end of the year. One of the things I'm most upset about, I think, is that we're not going to be getting to do this every second night like we have been for the last few months. So But I'm real excited to go over everything here. I'm excited for what the offseason's going to hold. So, yeah, I'm pumped.
And I see you're not the only one, as Maddie Wins out on the East Coast says, I was starting to get landing strip withdrawals. And there was no way we could end the season with a 30-minute choppy stream from Dallas. We had to dive in and really give this a bit of an autopsy, give us a little bit of a bigger discussion on what we saw this year, what we didn't see at the end, how do we get there, what it all means. And I think there is like so many directions to go with this Winnipeg Jets season that I'm excited to see what our audience thinks. I see Gilbert Marion says success, ... or disappointment, ... And we're going to work our way through our bigger picture thoughts on that topic as we get going here. But as usual, a little bit of a different way to do this. Actually, let's do some announcements right off the beginning. Instead of the 3 stars at the end, Turd Ferguson reached out with an idea, Mikey, so I give you some time to get going here and think about it. We're going to do 3 things that the Winnipeg Jets must do to take another step at the end of the show, so think about that. And a couple announcements. I am heading to Ireland Saturday, so we're going to be not doing any content for the 2 weeks. I plan on shutting things off, and me and Mikey were talking about an idea here. We got 2 ideas on what the next versions of the landing strip off-season editions could look like. One I plan on, and we'll see if I could do this. This is going to be a stretch. This is going to be tough for me. But one idea is I'm going to be getting a SIM card out there so I can use my phone, but I don't plan on downloading social media or anything. I really want to get ingrained into what's going on in Ireland, learn about my family history, and really soak up that trip. That I'm going to try and avoid any and all Jets news for the 2 weeks. And the first thing we'll do when I get back is Mikey and I will do an episode where Mikey will read out in order any bits of Jets news that have come out, whether it be signing, extensions, players not coming back, or rumors, and we'll do a bit of a live reaction to what I've missed in the previous 2 weeks. It's going to be hard for me to do this, but we're going to give this a try. And the other idea Mikey had with the call-in aspect of the show, we want to give you all a chance to still call in on the direct line and leave voicemails. So if you want to see us do an episode where you get to call in and leave a voicemail on trade ideas, signing ideas, what you want the Jets off-season to look like, Mikey's going to compile those on my 2 weeks away, and then he's going to surprise me with them, and we're going to live react and do a show together on that. So I forget the number top of hand, Mikey, if you want to put that out there. But those are some of the ideas. After the 2 weeks I'm gone, we're looking to kind of jump back into the content and bring some more stuff on the Jets offseason, if that is something you are looking at.
Yep. So we'll starting tomorrow, we'll open up the voicemail box to everybody. 1-204-800-0409. That's how you get on the line. So there you go. 1-204-800-0409. We'll also we'll put it out on the Facebook and Twitter and all that type of stuff as well. But yeah, starting tomorrow, we'll open up the voicemail box, and you'll have a chance to leave us a message that then we'll review them when Nick gets back.
In which choices TK says the way Chevy moves, that will be a 5-minute show. And yeah, it might come of nothing. It's just an interesting idea that I thought if he got active, this is a big summer, and we're going to dive into that on the second half of this show. If he gets active, it could be a bit of a fun one. Big Papa does say Chevy is going on demon mode this offseason. Trust. And Scott Westman says Scott's hot take is 27 doesn't sign. Jets announce extension for 81 pretty much right after. Hashtag distractions. We're going to dive into some of that as the show goes on. But let's look back, whereas before we look forwards, because we are still coming off what was a very, very good regular season from the Winnipeg Jets. Franchise setting. Most franchise wins. Most franchise points. We will be hanging a President's Trophy banner in Game 1 of next year, which is something to be proud of. Mm-hmm. The Central Division banner as well. And this team did take real steps forward this year, both in their style of play, but coming together as a real team and really being a team through 82 games, fighting some demons in round one before making it to round two. So I do want to touch on all of that kind of stuff before we look at some of the reasons why the Jets are no longer playing, some of the bigger picture reasons why that isn't, and what's going to have to change throughout the summer, what lessons need to be learned, and where the Jets need to come back first. So with that all being said, Mikey, we've had some time to digest. Playoffs didn't go anywhere where we wanted. Like Gilbert points out, great regular season, but a 6-7 playoff record.
Yep.
As you sit here today, it's a few days out. You've gotten to hear the leaders of the team. You've gotten to hear Kevin Cheveldayoff and Scott Arniel. You got to witness this season. What is your head at first when it comes, or I guess, what is your big takeaway? We'll keep that theme going. What's your big takeaway leaving the 2024-2025 Winnipeg Jets season?
So I feel like I'm a circus performer sometimes with the way that you kind of have to walk a tightrope, because this team legitimately was so good for long stretches of the year. When things are going right for this group, it goes really, really right. The ceiling on it is absolutely incredible. We saw it all year long. It ended up in a President's Trophy. So, the power play was first or second throughout the entire season. There was a lot that went right, and there is a lot that you can take from that going forward. So I don't want to sit and start by just absolutely dumping on the team, dumping on things, because again, that's fresh, right? That's still the fresh part. Even though we've had some time, it's still fresh. So I do want to make sure that, especially so many individual players, right, hitting either career years or setting career highs for individual things. So there's so much to take away that were positives during the regular season. And even into the playoffs, there's a lot of positive moments that you can find throughout the course of the playoffs, especially the Manitoba Miracle, which is something that'll live on, in sports memory here for quite a long time. The spot where you start to have to kind of walk the rope a little bit is say, what do you do when things aren't going exactly the right way? And that's where I think the Jets really have to find the next step, that next level. It's not about a higher level of play. It's not about changing the system going forward. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's not like years past where they were blown out in the first round. I think what the Jets need to, and I say this as an organization as a whole, the coaching staff, the management going all the way up, I think they need to start finding a way to be more flexible. You can't have such a rigid line of thinking and expect that to get, results when it's not working for you. We're going to get into the exit interviews and things like that. But there was some comments from Scott Arniel today, which really highlighted, I think, the issue that they have sometimes of getting stuck in a certain way of thinking and not wanting to shift out of it and giving themselves more of an opportunity. So, over on Twitch, Choices TK, his takeaway is wasted opportunity. And that's kind of where I feel that the organization from a coaching staff and up was that it was a wasted opportunity of a season. But for the players themselves, I feel like there was a lot of great moments, a lot of really good things that they did this year. So I'm of two minds of it still.
Yeah, I like how Kevin K over on YouTube kind of sums it up. Regular season success from the lens of a preseason prediction. Playoffs a disappointment after such a great regular season for me, anyways. And I come out of it. I've had my time to, especially doing content like this. Obviously, during the playoffs, we were really riding the waves. And after each season, I like to kind of take a dive into things and get like a sober look and really see where I think things went wrong and where things went well. And I think it's important to highlight all of those things. I do think some of the reaction in the media locally and a lot of the fan base is a little bit celebratory for me, given how this ended. I'm kind of done in year 14 of watching Winnipeg Jets fans and media want to talk about other teams' failures when those teams played one more game than the Winnipeg Jets. Like at some point we got to worry about our own backyard here. When it comes to this backyard, though, they absolutely hit it out of the park in the regular season. No one projected them to be the winner of the entire league. No one saw that coming.
No.
And I think they deserve a ton of credit in that. And Scott Arniel is someone that does deserve credit in that. The way I judge GMs and the way I judge coaches, I look at the roster and I give it a rough idea where I expect that roster to be. I take a look at where other sources are also projecting that, so I'm not just stuck in my own bubble. Yep. And before the season, I had this team finishing 97 to 103 points. That's kind of the range I figured, which would have been, in my opinion, third in the Central. And given the open spaces on the roster, the fact they don't have a 2C, the fact that they have a top-end right-handed D problem, for them to win the President's Trophy, despite that, shows just how well this roster performed under the new coach in a system. We saw the specialty teams, especially the power play. PK is always something in Winnipeg that could use a bit more improvement than we've ever seen. There was only one good year of it in our time here, which is really fascinating to me with different staffs, different players and whatnot. But the power play became a legit weapon that helped carry this team to that type of success. We saw them operate at an NHL elite level there, and specialty teams I credit to coaching. We saw a lot of career years, which goes to the players talking about the 5 to 10% like they've discussed, but it also goes to coaching, implementing the right system and having trust in those guys. And you could see, if you're looking for a big positive to build off of this year, it's safe to say, and this goes back to Bones and Bones' legacy, that this franchise and the dressing room, which was the biggest problem in the Blake Wheeler, Paul Maurice days, is definitely gone. There is no question back that the culture in Winnipeg is in a really good spot. Adam Lowry deserves credit with that. Talk about a perfect captain, from being the one to skate over to Scheifele after Game 6 in the penalty box, to some of his comments today where he's clearly disappointed, but he's seeing where this is going. And I actually, one takeaway I have leaving the exit interviews, and I know I talked about it, I think in Game 6, it might have been Game 4. The one thing I didn't want to hear from this organization was what we normally hear after they have a rough playoff, and, well, look at how successful we are. We made it to the playoffs. You guys should be happy about this. And we didn't hear that today. And I think that was a positive step, where it seemed like almost some of the questions lobbed their way were meant for that kind of. We heard it a little bit. We're meant for that kind of reaction, but we actually saw both the players and Chevy and Arniel really go the opposite route with it, where there's like things they like, things they're proud about, but they're not done. And it was refreshing to see that from this organization, in my opinion. It was not something I wanted to see celebrated, and we didn't see that. We saw them really touch on both the good and the fact that they're not content with this result. So I think that was a real positive from them. And then it comes to the playoffs, where we saw a real rough first round. Right to the brink, get that historic moment, something we're always going to live through. One of their key young players breaks through in that 1.6, in that game in general, which is great to see. Being a part of that, getting to go with you, that's always going to stand out to me as an awesome time. And then on the flip side, seeing a lot of the things they should have learned from playoffs past come to bite them in the ass against Dallas, who was really beatable. They gave Dallas a real fight. This wasn't the Avs series last year, so it's hard to get on the players for the effort. They brought it. Where my disappointment really lies this year is when you look at the business of the NHL. The salary cap really drives the opportunity to win cups. And I thought the Winnipeg Jets had a real special opportunity this year with Dylan Sandberg breaking out, who for me is the story of the Winnipeg Jets season, and their ability to find a number one pairing level defenseman that is a legit shutdown and should be a cornerstone moving forward here. he was only making $1.5 million. Cole Perfetti on a bridge deal with cap in the bank. Gabe Vilardi being on his 3.5 or whatever it was. Nick Ehlers last year at $6 million. Connor having 2 more years. Well, this past year and 1 more year at just over 7. Josh Morrissey at 6. When you have that type of nucleus undervalued, that's when you take a shot. And that's where the disappointment for me comes. The players, they left it all on the line. They gave me a season that I'll remember. I got to watch, 40 games live this year. Incredible year for me to be a part of and to see it all unfold, to really believe in this team having a shot again, because it has been a long time. And a lot of that goes to the structure and the players and what they really put together. But I just can't help but look at the last 12 months and a GM that brought in that 12 months, Jared Anderson-Dolan, Hayden Fleury, Luke Shen, and Brandon Tanev. And I can't help but say, I see in Ehlers We Trust says coaching staff gets an A, players get an A, Chevy a B for a total score of B+. I would give the players an A. I would give Scott Arniel in his rookie debut until the playoffs an A. And I would give Cheveldayoff a big fat F this year. I think this is the worst 12-month span of his general manager career. And if he walks out, if Nick Ehlers walks out of town, it is one of the worst 12 months we've seen from a GM in this league, and we can't ignore that side of it.
Yeah, that's a big swing, right? Going from an A and then straight to an F on.
I can't see it any other way.
Right. The interesting thing is, so are we including playoffs or not? Right? Is this an entire season, or are we just cutting off at the regular season? Because that changes the Scott Arniel grade. The Scott Arniel grade for me is highly dependent on where we're putting that line. In the regular season, to corral this group for 82 games, consistently be either number 1, number 2 in the league, and finish off with that President's Trophy is absolutely incredible. The way they did it with the power play, not the strongest 5-on-5 game for some stretches of the year, and riding Connor Hellebuck. Yeah, that was, they absolutely deserve a lot of praise for that. But the inability to make any adjustments come playoff time, I think kind of should bring that down. So if we're looking at the season overall, I agree. I give the players an A. I don't know what else they really could have done. I feel like they should at least be able to shake some of the playoff choking narrative around a lot of the guys on the team. They broke the whiteout curse, as in Ehlers We Trust points out. And tons of guys, like we said, had either career seasons or just, absolutely out of their mind play. So I agree. I give the players an A. I don't know what else they could have done to put themselves in a position. The coaching staff, if we're looking at the whole season, I'm more leaning towards that kind of, B-ish level, maybe, just because, again, I can't give them an A for what happened during the playoffs. And Kevin Cheveldayoff, yeah, I'm kind of with you. That's an F. There was no way to find a backup plan at the deadline. There was no plan B. There was no ability to pivot once you realized, hey, maybe we're getting played on this whole Brock Nelson thing. To have this team and be in such a good position, to have so much cap space, so much capital in terms of players and picks to use, and to come away from the deadline with no extra skill, no extra ability to help out your top 6 when it was very clearly something that you needed. I'm kind of with you on that one. I don't know how to give him a higher grade. He missed the mark at the deadline, and this was their biggest opportunity.
Oh, I like this pushback from Rahul. Sorry, the players shook the choking label. Heli MVP to what in the playoffs? And if you do look at the playoffs, I do think the 2 guys that are the most elite, and it's specifically Connor Hellebuck, was the biggest disappointment. Josh Morrissey, going to need to be better in the playoffs, and I think he's kind of escaped that a little bit. But they did get over that first-round hump through a team effort. And here's where I'll go with the Scott Arniel thing, because obviously I'm frustrated, and like we were calling this out from January, February to March. It was nice to see some of our listeners go back to those shows and wanted to kind of give us that credit on the final show last episode, that we're a bit of a prophets on some of the realities that ended up coming up in the playoffs and being too dependent on the power play and goaltending, and they lost both. On Arniel, because of what happened in the regular season, I almost think, and it's frustrating. This is where I do get frustrated, especially with Arniel and Chevy, is that they are paid a lot of money to really understand this. And I think Arniel was a product of, or his own success in the regular season was actually like his biggest Achilles heel come playoff time. Not being able to recognize, recognize some of the deficiencies in that lineup when he'd come to the playoffs. Like outside of Connor Hellebuyck, who we've beaten that horse dead. He needs to be better in the playoffs. I thought he gave them a real chance against Dallas. I thought there was a step forward, but it still wasn't the MVP we come to expect, and we can't lay him off the hook on that. But I do think, where was it going? I was talking about Arniel, right?
Yep.
I do think he was a victim of his own success in the regular season and not going through the large swoons. Like one thing the Jets didn't do this year that they have in years past was they would go on those long, lengthy road trips, and they'd have trouble finding that system. Or not road trips, just losing streaks. And they'd have trouble getting back to that system.
Yep.
We didn't really see that in their game this year. There was, 3 or 4 2 to 3 game losing streaks all year.
Yep.
And he didn't use those times to really experiment. He was stuck in this way, and they were chasing their presence, and they won it. So he gets credit there. But when it came to the playoffs, outside of the Connor Hellebuyck thing and needing to be fixed, and I see Bones 2020 wasn't too happy with us earlier. It says, I'm back. Helly and JMO Hate has me back in. Those are the Jets' 2 elite players. They have to be their best players in the playoffs, and I don't think either has been. I think Sandberg and Pionk were clearly their 2 best demon in the playoffs, and that's telling when it comes to JMO being that difference maker. But when it comes to Arniel, and where I get frustrated with how the playoffs happened is I don't believe the 0-10 road thing is just a Connor Hellebuyck issue. And we talked about this going into the year. We talked about it earlier in the year. The fact is we knew at the deadline that Adam Lowry's line would be the de facto second line in the playoffs. And this is where shit goes downhill. Let me get to it before people get fired up. But on the road, the Winnipeg Jets lineup, as constructed, is the easiest playoff team to match up against if you are the other team's coach, objectively. I would love to be a coach of another team with a playoff-style roster to be able to match up with the Winnipeg Jets at home. Or, when I'm at home. The way that they keep trying to do this top 9 simply will not work when it comes to the playoffs. Their first line is an all-offensive, no defensive line that is very easily shut down when you're aggressive on them in the D zone, and you really take away those walls, and you lean on them. You lean on Kyle Connor, the puck's going the other way. You create a turnover in the D zone, those guys are flying the zone. And that's easy to match up with when they're the only offensive threat in your top 6 that you got to worry about. And in the playoffs, a line of Mason Appleton, Nino Niederreiter, Adam Lowry playing second line is asking you for the scoring troubles you get. Yeah, they can handle matchups. They've been a pretty good matchup line, but that is probably the worst second line in the NHL playoffs. You're just not going to get any offense out of them. And on the road, you got a goal a game from your top 6. You had your top line running an expected goals percentage under 40%. That's a hard hill to climb over. Never mind the fact you weren't getting the saves. This isn't me finding a reason to absolve Hellebuyck, like I know Rahul and me have been going at the last little bit. But the reality is, you're playing the Dallas Stars. You need goals, and it's not even his fault. This is where coaching comes in. But Mason Appleton's playing multiple more minutes than Nick Ehlers, and you're struggling to score goals. You have to re-envision this lineup so that home games, because I think it would be bold to predict that the Winnipeg Jets win the division moving forward, and they can go on that miracle 28-game Stanley Cup trip. You're going to have to win games on the road.
Yep.
And until the organization, and I hope this is something that comes up this summer, until they're willing to now get – the room's in a good place. The players are in a good place. It's time to get a little uncomfortable and be willing to move guys around the lineup. We just saw a full season where Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor did not play without each other. if there was no injury. That doesn't happen in any other NHL room. And this is an opportunity. Like, people look at it as shitting on Kyle Connor. You have a chance to run 2 top 6 lines with 30-plus goal scorers on a team that's struggling to score in the playoffs, and use that Adam Lowry line as a third line. Nick Ehlers has always been that answer, and he might be walking out the door. This is where it's a missed opportunity, is because you got so fixated on this group that was always going to be the easiest to match up against. And it led to one of your best offensive players being the 7th most played player in the playoffs. This is where the adjustment has to come back going into next year. It's time to revisit what a top 9 in the NHL could look like, so you can get more goals up and down your lineup and not just depend on that top line to carry you. Because goal scoring was a problem across the board. Bottom 6 was a problem. On the road, the top 6 was a big problem. And you're just not going to win like that. You got to really go to the drawing board and re-look at what an NHL top 9 in today's generation looks like, because that Adam Lowry line is just not going to do it as a number 2.
It's not. You hit the nail completely on the head. You're a lineup that is struggling to find goals in the middle, but you're absolutely dead set on loading everything that you have offensively on the top line, and then playing a line that is a quote unquote shutdown, quote grinder line, whatever you want to call it, in second line minutes. You're limiting all of your offense to one spot, and when it doesn't work for whatever reason on whatever evening, whether that's because you don't have the matchup advantage or because they've got just a better line that you're going up against, you have no way of getting away from that because you're afraid to rock the boat. So it's tough. That's what I'm hoping for in the offseason this year, is they need to start being comfortable. I'll use the cliche. They need to start being comfortable being uncomfortable. They've got to just get out there and start trying some of those things, whether that's early on in the season before you start getting, too ingrained into the schedule, whether that's during a losing streak. So you've got, a bit of cover to try things, whatever it is. They've got to find a way to do it, because you need that other level come playoff time. You need to be able to get creative, to outcoach the opposite coach. You can't, like you said, you can't expect to just win every home game as the President's Trophy winner every year. That's not realistic. So you're going to have to start winning road games in the playoffs consistently, like you do during the regular season. It can't be a whole thing about it. And whether that's a mental block, again, that, in my opinion, falls on your coaching staff. What are your coaches, one of the things they're responsible for is that overall mentality, is that overall approach to the game that your players should be bringing. If they get the credit when, everybody is playing well and vibing and doing, all the right things, quote unquote, and winning, the President's Trophy. So if he gets the credit for that with a Jack Adams nomination, why is it then that the coaches don't have to wear any of the issues where, look, in the playoffs, we needed more from Hellebuck, you needed more from Morrissey, you needed more from the top line, you needed more from almost every single player. That's, at a certain point, that stops being on each single individual player. When it's so widespread like that, you start to need to look at the guy who's supposed to be in charge of that, and that is your coaching staff. So while the players individually wear a lot of what went on in the playoffs, if the coaches get the credit for that regular season success, then I think they should wear an equal amount of the blame for that, large swath of players who didn't hit their playoffs well.
Yeah, my other big takeaway too, just from where they need to get better in the playoffs as well, is we saw them go and try and grit it up with the Brandon Tanevad and Luke Schenn. And the plan was for Luke Schenn and Logan Stanley to be the third pair. And it goes against everything I see. And I think this should be the takeaway both in Dallas, though they're a round ahead, and Winnipeg, is just how important puck movers are in today's game, especially come playoffs time. You want to find ways to get more offense. The Jets really were a team that would shoot themselves in the foot, getting caught in their own zone. They're a team, especially with that bottom 6, struggling to get opportunities, and that was where Nick Ehlers ends up slotting in. The bottom of the lineup needs to be able to move the puck, and I find it pretty inexcusable that Luke Schenn's playing with broken ribs when Colin Miller's right there and he brings that. They really have to learn that this decor does need to get an added infusion of puck movement to be able to make this all work.
Yeah, while I agree with you, unfortunately, I still don't think the coaching staff does. In Scott Arneal's comments today, he talked about how Luke Shen missing time in the playoffs was only due to the injury. Had nothing to do with, stylistic play, with matchups, with wanting to get a puck mover onto there. They would have happily trotted out a healthy Luke Shen, Logan Stanley third pairing against Dallas the entire way through. If
It would have been Fleury. It would have been Fleury.
or Fleury, pardon
Stanley
me.
was
Sorry.
healthy.
Pardon me, Fleury. If it wasn't for that injury to Luke Shen. So I agree. And they do need to, again, it's a way to get a little bit creative, right? You have a matchup where, you're going to get skated around like that. Play the guy who can move the puck, who can transition, who gives you some offensive, movement from the point, as opposed to your plotting, bigger, bruising guy who's going to get danced around. But it doesn't seem like they're ready to start making those type of those changes yet, which is, again, kind of why I can't give them such a high grade. We need to be able to see a little bit of flexibility, I think, when it gets, like I said, when things aren't going perfectly their way.
As Mike F says, team that's short on transition forwards wanted Shen and Stanley as their D pair, which is just crazy.
Yep.
It's kind of, honestly, given the Leafs and the Jets comparisons have been out there, it's kind of, honestly, you saw both teams make the same mistake this year, where they bought into the old school. We need more grit. We need more toughness in the lineup, and that's what's going to carry us over. And the toughness in the lineup led to 13-2 goals difference for the other team when Luke Shen was on the ice, which is just not good. And Brandon Tanev doing what? Doing what? You look fast out there. You look like you worked hard, but did not tip the scales in the other way. And that plays into this, right? Leafs just had the same problem with their bottom six getting shellacked.
Yep.
It's not the lessons to learn from where teams that are taking the step are going with their style of play, with their rosters, with what they have to utilize. And that's the type of thing you got to look at in reverse course. They need more puck movement. They need to be able to play a fast game.
Yep.
The fast game lets them turn the entire system over into the ozone. Like, that is the one thing I think you should be excited about. Despite the flaws on the D-core, this team was still a very good defensive team this year. The defensive structure in Winnipeg is tight.
Yep.
And despite having some issues on the D-core, like Dylan DeMello and his decline this year on the top pair, despite having Luke Shen, Logan Stanley, Hayden Fleury, who didn't look like an NHL player halfway through the season and then jumped in and had a big postseason for the Winnipeg Jets, talking about potentially staying. It further amplifies. We had a bit of debate as the year went on about getting a defenseman versus center. I think based on how this season played out, center has to be the priority. Has to be. This team needs a top six impact player, and the defensive structure is good enough to take another step, but they need to find the offense.
Yeah, it's something that they're going to need to add from somewhere else, because if you get the six guys that you started or that you ended the year with, starting next year, you're going to see a lot of those same deficiencies when it comes to the offensive side from that D-core. But like you said, that structure is tight. Like they've really found a way to put it together and stay together. That, again, that's one of the biggest difference from years past. Was this year they didn't get away from their game for large stretches, and it showed. They were able to keep that structure. So if they can find a little bit of offensive help for the D-core externally coming in, it would go a real long way.
A couple of comments from Bones I'll highlight here on Fleury. Says, also, I want to give some flowers to Fleury. There isn't a single player in the NHL looking the part of a complete player yet is no better than a 7-8 guy. And that's probably the best way to put it. And also says, I'm going to push back on the grit toughness thing. And while I don't agree with this, I believe Shen was more about helping the room get over the demons in the playoffs. And that was definitely an aspect to this all, was Luke Shen being the teammate he is and being a part of it. Marty, we are not taking calls on tonight's, but we will have a voicemail line open leaving tonight's show that you can leave voicemails for when we come back in 2 weeks. We just want to kind of dive through everything, get some thoughts out of the chat, and keep her moving on this night. We don't want to get too bouncing around. So Luke Shen clearly brought that value. I do agree with Bones there, but that is a guy and the type of role he plays. If he's going to be in the lineup every day, you do have to go get him a puck mover on the left side. We were talking about it at the deadline when the trade came through. And I do see that value. And speaking of Luke Shen, I do want to go one spot with this and why there's some optimism going into the summer as well. Because despite the frustrations and where we are with the coach and management and how this was kind of handled, the bones are in place. Talk about a little pun on words with Bones in the chat. The bones are still in place for the Winnipeg Jets to be a good team that needs a big offseason to be a great one. Some big conversations to be had. But the Luke Shen convo brings me here because obviously we know how the Winnipeg Jets org has taken care of the Luke Shen conversation. And I found it really interesting and very good to see Elliot Friedman discussing this, Martin Biron discussing this. A lot of the voices that talk to people around the league that are outside Winnipeg were making the suggestion that a lot of what the Winnipeg Jets showed this year, both the organization, team captain Adam Lowry, and how the whole team handled the Mark Scheifele thing, the org flying out members of the team for the Brad Scheifele funeral, Luke Shen getting to spend time at home after not expecting to end up in Winnipeg, that paired with the President's Trophy, the success, the fact that they're always in the playoffs, though they're a piece or two away from really taking a deep run, will at least open some more doors around the NHL where teams or where players should look at Winnipeg and say, look at the culture. And I'll say this. I was talking to a player a couple of years ago, and I had asked him, he's very familiar with Winnipeg, this guy, and I'd asked him, given you're from here and you're now enjoying the NHL and other markets, what do you think Winnipeg needs to do to take a step? And his answer at the time, this was the last year of Blake Wheeler, his answer at the time was kind of focus on like the northern states, Minnesota areas like the Jets do. Focus on Europeans and Western Canadians was kind of the typical answer. But then he really dove into it where he said the first thing the Winnipeg Jets have to do is fix the locker room, because anything you've heard about Blake Wheeler, we've heard a lot worse. And the Winnipeg Jets have successfully, in 3 years' time, turned the corner from that environment to a culture where everyone wants to be a part. We saw today. The narrative, I don't care if you hear it outside the market, the narrative that players do not want to be and stay in Winnipeg died today with the exit interviews and virtually every player really reflecting on what it meant to be here. And I think that's important coming into this summer, because this is a big summer. This is a really big summer.
Yep, it's huge. This is going to go a long way to show what things could look like for the Jets going forward. We like to, as a city, fall back on the thing always of, nobody wants to come to Winnipeg. Everybody hates Winnipeg. The league hates Winnipeg. Bettman hates Winnipeg. Everybody hates Winnipeg, which, again, I think is just a lot of leftover pain from the team leaving the first time around, which was, I was a little kid during that span. I get it. The thing is, though, winning fixes everything. Winning fixes it. It doesn't matter. When Detroit was, a powerhouse early on, not the most fancy, amazing place to live, but, you can get it done and players will go because of it. It doesn't matter what you can absolutely cut all of that away with winning, with a positive reputation out there. And like you said, that national attention has been so positive about the way that the players have been treated, the way that the organization has really gone out of their way to fix that. And Bones gets a large portion of that credit for coming in and starting that off. And the transition to Scott Arniel in that aspect, I guess you can say is a positive, right? Keeping that same type of that line going on. So yeah, this is going to go a long way. It'll be interesting to see how, if that no trade clause issue starts to go away as well. There's not a ton of players out there with no trade clauses, right? It's like 25, 30% of the league, something like that. It's not crazy. It's not like it's over 50% or even close to 50%. So there's still a lot you can do. But if we can start getting to a point where you find out that the Jets aren't on a certain no trade list, or they do make a trade for somebody that has that clause, that'll also start going a long way, I think, to cutting that narrative out, because you can make yourself a destination to play. You just need to win. That's what it comes down to. Winning fixes everything. And if the Jets are doing that now, right, we've had a couple seasons of regular season consistent success, and if we can get a long playoff run, man, that's gonna change it all.
That's the thing. They have put together, what is it? It might even be the most wins in the regular season over the last 3 years now since the Bones transition, which isn't something to sniff at. The big questions for me are, is this organization comfortable, or are they prepared to do the hard thing to take the next step? And listening to Kevin Cheveldayoff and Scott Arniel today, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that topic, because I actually think we disagree a little bit on Arniel on the post the locker room cleanup. So I'm curious to see where this goes.
Okay, I'll be the bad guy today. I don't think they are. I do not think they are willing or able to make the hard decisions when it comes to getting a little bit creative with this roster, with this lineup, when it comes to the organizational approach in general. I think they are very comfortable being the President's Trophy winners. I think they are very comfortable. You're right. They do have the most wins in the NHL over the last 3 seasons. I think as an organization, from the general manager and up, they are very happy and comfortable with that. I think they are very happy and comfortable with 1 to 2 playoff rounds every year. Would they like a Stanley Cup? Fuck yeah. Would they, celebrate harder than anybody else? Absolutely. Do they dream of it? I bet they fucking do. But do I think they are willing to go out and make the hard choices when it comes to certain things? No, I kind of don't. I don't feel like they saw that, and I didn't get that big of a feeling during the end of the season pressers from them that they are. But I'd love to. I want to get your perspective on it, because, yeah, bring me over, save me from the edge.
I gotta see what really stood out to you from the Arniel stuff. The biggest question for me. So going into this summer, I think this is a big summer, and I think this is where it's tough on the timing of everything. Like, I get why there's so much jubilation about where the Jets got to in a lot of facets this year. There was a lot of good. But like I kind of mentioned earlier, this is entering a really tight rope for the Winnipeg Jets, not only to take a step, but to keep at the level they're at, right? The core is all 30+. Kyle Connor's due for a big contract next summer. Gabe Vilardi's due for a big raise this summer. Nick Ehlers is potentially walking out that door, and he's the linchpin to all of this. Dylan Sandberg's going to get a big raise off of where he is. Adam Lowry, we know they're going to get that done and make him a Jet for life, which is going to be an interesting one. They can't go too high on that one. So there's a lot of big financial decisions that's going to make it hard to bring everybody back and upgrade the roster. They're entering, and that's what's so frustrating about the whiff this year, is because when you just look at the business side, it's not going to get easier from here. Chevy's going to have to do something we haven't really seen him take. Mike Friesen on this topic says, controversial take. They shouldn't take on a lot of risk. They have a good thing going. And I think that's true from the business side of the operation. It's safe to say they got a lot of goodwill back in the market. I imagine season tickets have gone up for next year compared to where they were last year. They made good money making it into the second round. But I could not disagree more with Mike's take on they shouldn't take on a lot of risk. The reality is, if this team wants to keep a good thing going, they're going to have to take a risk, because it's going to start going backwards here. Similar to like the New York Rangers and New York Islanders, quicker than people probably want, quicker than probably the team wants, if they don't take risk. That is where I see it, where I think there's a bigger risk in them not taking risks to not only take a step, but prolong this window, because the darker days with any franchise, there's a clock. There's a clock with your core players. There's a clock with your best talent. And the Winnipeg Jets clock is coming a lot quicker than I think anyone's ready for, given the age of their best players, given the money, going out to their best players that I don't think they're in a position they can't take a risk. In fact, if they don't take a risk this summer, I think you see the steady decline into something really tough, and that would be a hell of a way to burn all the goodwill built back this year.
Yeah, the dark side of the fact that we had so many guys have career years and, better seasons than we've seen them have in, 5+ years and things like that. The dark side of that is you're not likely to get career years out of all of those guys again next year. A lot of these guys are 30 plus. A lot of these guys aren't, on the highward trajectory. This was, the stars all aligned this year to have so many guys play incredibly well all at the same time. It worked out fantastic for the Jets, except that, they didn't get their ultimate prize in the end. So, yeah, it's hard to say that you're expecting a step up and an increase and things like that going forward from a year that was, again, they were the best in the NHL and nobody's getting any younger. So unless you're willing to start getting creative with your lineup, unless you're willing to get creative with the roster itself, I don't know how you expect them to take another step forward if they've kind of like this feels kind of like the peak, right? For regular season success, for sure it is, right? Again, best in the league. I don't know how you say you go beyond that. So is a group that is not going to probably be as good, especially if Nick Ehlers walks out, which if you're discounting how good Nick Ehlers is and how important he is to the roster, again, this is a player who is providing you with offensive production at a much higher rate than the minutes that he is being given. So plotting somebody else into that spot doesn't automatically just, you'll get to fill in those numbers. He's giving you so much more than what a replacement player generally is in that spot. They're going to take an offensive step back if you lose him, and you don't get an interesting or creative way to if you lose Nick Ehlers and you just replace him with Chibrikov and you bring back the rest of that forward group the exact same way. Do we expect them to go farther in the playoffs than they did this year? Truthfully,
do we expect them to make the playoffs?
Right, like probably, they'll be in the hunt, but it just so again, I don't. It's not even so much about risk for me, right? I don't see signing Nick Ehlers as a risk. Now that's providing Ehlers will want to stay, which after that the usage he's been through here, I don't know if he's going to want to do that. That's going to take a whole lot of work on Kevin Cheveldayoff's part to convince him to stay. But if he does want to stay, I don't see that as a risk, but I do see that as a big move that I'm not sure the Jets are going to be able to do because they've been so stagnant, so locked into their ways.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. On the wrist talk, Marty Thome says, basically, I'll just say this, just because Monahan and Toffoli didn't work out 1 year ago doesn't mean they should shy away from making improvements to their top six, which is absolutely correct.
Oh, can I talk on that real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
At the presser today, when they asked about the deadline and not being able to add, more than the guys that they did, Chevy was very quick to point out that when they did add a couple, higher end players last year, that meant Cole Perfetti didn't get to play. So if we did that again this year, maybe there was no Perfetti in the playoffs and we don't get that miracle moment. So yeah, I'm kind of getting the feeling that they are shying away from that because it didn't work out last year, and they're not willing to have more of a wide range of options come at the deadline. They had the one guy they locked in on, and when that didn't work, they went, oh well, and shrugged their shoulders and moved on. I agree it shouldn't mean that, but I'm kind of getting the feeling that it does mean that to them.
Not a chance this summer. Not a chance this summer. They're going to learn from this one. You cannot run a top.
When have they learned in the past? When have they learned it?
They've tried different routes. You can make the case that they learned from that mistake and tried something different if you want to be optimistic about
That's
it.
true.
You can make the case. I'm not saying I would buy the case. I'm just saying you could buy the case.
All right.
But a lot of big things coming. Let's start with Ehlers. Let's talk about some Kyle Connor, Gabe Vilardi, Sandberg. Those are the big pillars obviously coming up. And It's kind of poetic, honestly. We talked about how poetic it was that Mason Appleton was in the big spot, not scoring in Game 6 after he got overplayed to oblivion.
Yep.
It's also kind of poetic, and it's going to be an interesting game of poker. And I found it actually really interesting and encouraging that Kevin Cheveldayoff spoke so publicly about Nik Ehlers in the fashion he did today, where he said him and his agent already talked for 2 hours. They haven't gotten to sit down Nik yet, but he wants to make him a Jet for life. And Kevin Cheveldayoff is very careful in the media. There was a lot of Chevy speak today, too. You could yawn at half of that stuff. You could roll your eyes at half of that stuff. But I do think that was a telling nugget that he does feel like they have a real chance at keeping him. But isn't it poetic that the guy in their core that they've undervalued, underplayed, consistently talked about trading, consistently played him as a third liner despite being the second most important forward here, and I'll argue that with anybody, that their window depends on now rehashing and making that guy happy. This is either going to be Kevin Cheveldayoff's best sell job at this point. I don't see it the same. I've had a lot of people suggest it's very similar to Scheifele and Hellebuck, and I don't see it that way because everyone knew Scheifele and Hellebuck were the apple to the org's eye. They were going to do what they needed to do if those two were willing to do it. Before the season, I know I was on an island, and I'm still surprised, and maybe it's like you get locked in on your own take, but my big preseason prediction before the year was that Nik Ehlers would be the first Winnipeg Jet to walk in free agency as a skilled player. And I got a lot of pushback that the expectation he was that he would get traded. There's no way the Jets would do that. And for me, the crux of my take was the Jets were always going to be a playoff team. And you were never, despite what people fantasy booked and fantasy traded, in the marketplace of the NHL, you were never going to get enough value for Nik Ehlers to justify a trade in season as a rental winger that you've played as a third liner. You had butchered the value so much, and rentals, it's harder to get players for the now anyways, but you had neutered the value so much. And it's a fascinating game of poker now because if Nik Ehlers walks out the door, the step back next year is going to be bigger than people expect. And it's a case where in times past, you can't really put it on the org with PLD. You can't really put it on the org with Jacob Trouba. Yep. But if Nik Ehlers walks out the door, you 100% will and should blame Kevin Cheveldayoff and how he's managed and watched coaches manage such a valuable asset. Now, if I wanted any GM probably in this spot, it's probably Kevin Cheveldayoff, given how he's handled these situations in the past, and it does seem like a door is at least open. But my theory's always been, given the rising cap, given that he very easily can get more opportunity elsewhere, and anyone thinking otherwise is just not paying attention, was that to show him goodwill, it was going to take something like 8x8 to 8x8.5 to be in that pedestal of the core of this group. And I was always wondering if the Jets would be willing to do it. And after listening to Chevy today, I think they might get it done, actually.
You know, that was actually the one part of the presser from Chevy and Arneal today that I did enjoy was his comments on Nik Ehlers. The Jet for Life thing definitely stood out to me. It scratched the right part of my brain. And like you said, if there's any GM you want making this type of pitch, it is Kevin Cheveldayoff, who absolutely loves his draft picks. His first round guys, these are their family to him. The way that he sees it, the way that he speaks about them. You can think whatever you want about Chevy's effectiveness as a general manager at different points throughout his career, his very long tenured career, right? There's been ups, there's been downs, but one of the things I think most people can kind of see and not argue is that he absolutely does care for those guys and will hold on to them, right to the very end, because he does believe that he can make that pitch and he can keep them around. There are a couple things that the Jets can offer Ehlers that, other places can't. One is that 8th year, right? That extra year on the contract. And the other thing is the opportunity to, we like to joke about it and whatever, but quote unquote, run it back. He's been with these guys, this group, these players for quite a long time. And I do think there is kind of something to the fact that they do have so much regular season success. They do see themselves as, Vilardi, especially today, talked about how they were a bounce here or there, away from, maybe being able to be the ones playing tonight. And I do think there is value in that to a player like Nik Ehlers. So I do have some hope as well. It may be fool's hope, but I am hoping that they can find a way to get that done. 8.5 by 8. Let's do it. There's no problem for me on that one. But Mike F over on Twitch is starting to break my heart a little bit with with Chevy setting up we tried our best when he signs elsewhere with those comments.
And that could be an angle too.
Always
Mike
possible.
They give us a natural. Mike F gives us a natural, but I'll say this, Bones, if you can get Vern to call in, I'd love to hear it. Bones also says the Jets should not give Ehlers 8 years. I'm not sure why I want him signed. And I would, in an ideal world, I would want him at 6 years. I'd want him till 35. I don't think that gets it done. And this management group has not shown any type of aggression that they'll be able to fill that hole. But there's a couple of interesting spots this goes. In Ehlers We Trust says, would you consider trading KFC if you locked in Ehlers? Mike Friesen says, how much depends on Kyle Connor wanting too much money? And also Mike says, who is 55 going to prioritize signing long-term? Ehlers, Connor, Vilardi, he might just have a say. So I use that to parlay into this. I was kind of surprised. I didn't read too much into it, but I got a lot of texts reading into Kyle Connor's comments yesterday. Talked highly of Winnipeg, talked highly about being here. But a lot of people got stuck up on it's not just me now, referencing his new baby. Did you read that into anything about him potentially wanting to move closer to home, or did you see it as classic contract speak? You're not showing your whole hand.
Yeah, it didn't feel like anything different or egregious to me. I watched the clip go all the way through. The interviewer starts by asking, or the reporter starts by asking him about Scheifele and Hellebuck and putting down roots with their contract and family and that type of stuff. And that's why I think we get that type of little bit extra on the answer of, it's not just me anymore, right? I think to me that was just him saying, yeah, in the old days, it was, my agent just did everything. They brought it to me, at the end with a finalized, kind of deal. We talk about it and they go off and they get it done. Now it's, he does have to consider a family and he does, want to be, to me, it was more about the long-term contract, right? Being stable long-term in Winnipeg, with that family now that he's thinking about, not that he's thinking about them and wants to uproot and leave and go somewhere else. I read it literally the exact opposite, that, yeah, I want to be here long-term because I'm not thinking about just myself. It's also my family.
Yeah, I didn't personally read too much into it, but I could see that takeaway. I mean, if you have your first young child, maybe you want to be closer to the grandparents and stuff like that. It's not a situation I've been in, so it's hard for me to really judge. I just know on the surface, I didn't take too much from it. I've always kind of assumed he was going to be here. I've always kind of assumed that they were going to spend way too much money on him coming up next year. And I do say, I do think because of the reality of the cap, once that Connor contract is done, I do think the idea of a Winnipeg Jets Cup becomes even less likely, and it becomes a bit of a Hellebuck, Scheifele, Connor legacy tour the rest of the way. Just my opinion. You could disagree with that, and that's more than fine. But on that, I expect him to be the big priority this summer. I would imagine we hear something early on in July if that's going the right way. But to kind of answer, and Scott puts it here, Connor loves it here, full stop. He's really fit into this. Clearly, he's the priority with the org. And on the business side, he's clearly worth a ton of money to the Winnipeg Jets. That KFC corporate deal, largely on his back.
Huge.
40 goal scorers, sell jerseys.
Yes, sir.
Made the national team. So this is me pointing out, the Jets will totally be justified in spending the money there. But because this is a podcast where we just get to say what we believe, and in Ehlers We Trust asked, I totally would. I totally would trade KFC if it meant signing Nik Ehlers. And I don't see it happening, but I think that would be a gift to Kevin Cheveldayoff if KC did want to return back closer to home, because it's a one core player. I think the Winnipeg Jets could really win a trade and extend the window much longer. In my opinion, the top line would get a lot better with Nick Ehlers taking that spot than Kyle Connor. And the return you'd get on a guy like that would finally answer either the center hole or the right-handed D hole. Now, it's not happening. There's no point in really banding about, but I'm just sharing because it was asked to me how I see that situation. I will be very much in the minority in this market, but I think when he signs that deal, it's going to be very hard for him to live up to it in his late 30s, and it's going to be very hard for the Winnipeg Jets to truly compete for a cup. But I see all the business case. He's a 94-point player. Goal scorers. He does the one skill in the NHL almost better than anybody in the league. I get all that. I'm just looking at it from how I believe if he were if he were to ask for a trade, I would trust Kevin Cheveldayoff to hit a fucking grand slam on that deal, and the Winnipeg Jets to actually be in a not a bad spot out of it.
So,
but I know he's your guy, so the floor is yours.
So with the Kyle Connor, Nick Ehlers thing, I don't know why we have to try to pit them against each other all the time in this scenario. People love to ask this question. Oh, should we trade Connor or should we trade Ehlers? Should we trade Connor? Oh, we can only keep one. You don't have to only keep one. You have the ability to have both guys signed. It doesn't have to be a one or the other situation. And like you said, Kyle Connor is my guy. That is, I love the goal scoring. That has always been my thing. People like to call him, Phil Kessel Jr. It was supposed to be an insult. That's a fucking compliment. He will be that streaky goal scorer right to the bitter end. The contract's not going to look great come, a few years past, because like you said, these are guys getting into their 30s now. But we do have a rising cap coming up over the next few years, a massive new TV deal signed with Rogers for the NHL. The Jets aren't going to be, they finished this year with $6 million in space. Yeah, they've got some raises and things coming, but they're going to be able to make this work. And I don't think you have to pick one or the other. You can sign both. I think the only hindrance between it isn't the cap. It's just that, can you convince Nick Ehlers that he's not going to waste the end of his career as a Jet for life? Can you convince him that this is going to actually work out this time around for him? So I'm going to say no, I'm not trading either one, and you sign both.
I like these takeaways from Bones here. The Connor thing just sounded like he wants his 8 years. He wants to tell his wife where they will be until hockey is over. Mikey is right. And that's the vibe I felt. Like, I really didn't come away from that concerned about him wanting out. Also on that, he says, if Connor signed for $11 million, him 55 and 37 would only be at like 26% of the cap. That's like three players being worth $19 million when they were on their run in 2018. And to that, I would ask you if you believe that a team could win the Stanley Cup with those three as their best players in their 30s, because I don't. If Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor are your best two forwards making that kind of money, I just don't see it. We've seen them try that duo year over year, and that duo flounder against better players. And you're going to up the thing. From a business perspective, from an organizational perspective, I get it. He is worth the money. It wouldn't even be an overpay. You got to keep the business healthy. I'm just saying, Mikey, you're right that it could be both. But if it's both, where do you get the center?
I mean, I hate...
And I'm just looking at this scenario, and it's not happening. This is us playing fantasy hockey. This isn't fantasy hockey. This is us playing fantasy hockey. But I do believe you upgrade your top line while fixing the center hole behind Mark Scheifele for a long, long term. That not many assets on this team really have the opportunity to pull that off. That's all I'm saying. Yeah,
if you're looking at it in terms of what is the most creative way for the Jets to make a big change quickly and still keep this window going, you're 100% right. You trade Kyle Connor, and you sign Ehlers, you trade Connor, and you finally fix that center spot. However,
save like $3 million on the cap too.
Yeah. But we know that that's just that's not their MO. That's not how they operate. But I don't think you have to do it. That's the thing. I think you can Do I think the Jets? Do I think this Jets roster currently right now, the one that just lost to Dallas, if they were a little bit more creative with the way that they deployed their lineup, and if they were a little bit luckier, just a touch, luckier in this playoff run, did I think they could win the cup? Fuck yeah, I did. I do think that this roster right now could have gone there and done it. Do I think that going forward, like you said, with the ages, the way that things are going, and if you lose a big piece like Ehlers, that window is going to be still sitting there? That's where I start to get worried.
Bones 2020 says, I mean, you might want to look at the money Jets were paying little Toby Perot. That was like $15 million, and I would counter that with go take a look at how much ELC contributions they're getting, and ask yourself who in the Jets farm system is going to carry that weight for them, because the system just doesn't have it. Outside Salmanson, who we saw some love for, and interesting comment from Scott Arneal looking at Dylan Sandberg as an Elias Salmanson mentor. Did you read that as potentially seeing a look at Salmanson Sandberg as a pairing next year?
Yeah, that was the one thing I liked from Chevy was the Ehlers stuff. The one thing I liked from Scott Arneal today was the comments about Elias Salmanson. When he was asked about him, Chevy first jumped in right away to talk about how much they loved Salmanson, how the first time Salmanson came to camp when Arneal was still running the D, how he was begging Chevy to find a way to keep him. I know you have to send him back because of his contract, but there's no so they made sure to jump in right away with we love this guy, all that stuff. Now again, that could be coach speak, that's whatever. But the part that jumped out at me from Scott Arneal was when he said, "We have a role model in front of him. For me, that's Dylan Sandberg. To me, that's the best part about it. We have somebody who we can talk to him about. We might have already talked to him a little." And to me, I read that as him saying they're going to be giving him a look at training camp, probably alongside Dylan Sandberg, who they like as a role model / mentor type thing. I at the deadline this year when they acquired Luke Shen, I said, I'm guessing they kind of want Luke Shen as a quote unquote, mentor for Logan Stanley. And lo and behold, we go throughout the season and we find out that, that was essentially their approach and what they were hoping for. And this follows under that same type of approach. It sounds like they're going to be looking at Salmanson, and, I'm hoping that they give him a shot alongside Sandberg.
Yeah, and our chat is all over it. I want to just answer Tony Valeri quickly. Can they get Connor at 9, or has that ship sailed? And that ship has definitely sailed with where the cap's going. If Kyle Connor signed in Winnipeg at $9 million, we should retire his jersey tomorrow.
It's $11 million.
For the discount he just gave the Winnipeg Jets, we should definitely retire that jersey at $9 million. It won't happen. And honestly, if he sat and waited for the open market, I could see like 12 being in his range, honestly.
Oh yeah, if he hit the open market, he could for sure go to get 12 plus. But I think they'll get him done here in the 11 range.
So on the Salo stuff, and our chat's all over this, and this was exactly my takeaway listening to the quotes from Chevy and Arneal. Choices TK says, "We love this guy. Ask Heinella how that worked out."
True.
Lucas Trapp said, "Didn't Arneal say he desperately needs Heinella, and then he just sat?" Kevin K said, "Coaches love Philly the last 2 preseasons too. I wouldn't get too worked up about them saying that about Salo right now." And Kevin Cheveldayoff reached into his 2020 playbook with saying that, when I sent Salo back to Sweden, Arneal asked me if I had to do that. And he used that quote with Paul Maurice and Ville Heinola. Until I see it, I do not believe it when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets hyping up their shiny new prospects, their shiny new toys. I think Elias Salmanson has a lot of the tools. He's the number 1 prospect in the system for a reason, in my books, as much as Jaeger gets the shine. And the Winnipeg Jets really do need him to hit when they've invested $12 million into Neil Pionk and Dylan DeMello to fix that right side. And the one thing, and Gilbert goes there, does that mean Pionk and Morrissey? Hell no. And that is my concern, is if the plan is to get Salo in there beside Sandberg, you've just invested $7 million into a guy that is going to sink your top pairing guy. I looked at it more as a mentor as to looking at Sandberg's path and kind of following some of the things it took him to get to the NHL. But that is a guy they could really use to help elevate the ceiling of the decor, elevate the puck movement. He has the size. He brings some physicality. That I think that's the piece that you earmark and hope it works out is Josh Morrissey's future partner. I just wonder about the construction of the decor if Elias Salmanson's playing next to Dylan Sandberg and what it means for Neil Pionk and Josh Morrissey's games.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many variables that'll still have to go into it, but it was interesting to see the effusive speech that was coming out of the guys, and it's true, right? We heard this about Heinola last year, and then it ended up going nowhere. If I want to make excuses and I want to make rationalizations, I could say like you said earlier, Scott Arniel was a victim of his own success, and Ville Heinola may have also been a victim of that as well. Whereas, this was the lineup that they were going to go with, and they stuck with it all year long. And, once they started and Heinola took too long to get back from injury, well, that was it. You're down to the bottom of the list. So if Salmanson's healthy and starts off there and, plays well in camp, maybe there is still a shot he can find a spot in that lineup. And yeah, maybe it doesn't have to be beside Sandberg to start. Maybe it's on the third pairing or even as a seventh defenseman, but it'll be interesting. I agree. He is their top prospect. He is their most NHL ready prospect. If he hadn't been hurt at the end of the year, we may have been able to see him even just get a cup of coffee, but they'll need, if we're talking about ELC contributions, if we're talking about finding ways to make the cap work going forward with raises coming, you're going to need a big minute player making less than $7 million on that decor. So that's a spot to do it.
Mooch Winnipeg says, feel like Sandberg Pionk won't be touched, and that feels like the right way to go about it. Would love to see Salo get eased in on a third pairing role and then eventually take over the DeMello spot one day, hopefully. And I think that's the ideal pathway.
Yeah.
Bones 2020 says Nick is right. Sandberg passed, and also Sandberg play type and size matches what Elias is. So he's a mentor like Dylan was a mentor for Sandberg. And hey, if you want to go under our boy Sandberg and really learn from him, I think that's a great situation. If he could become a right-handed, somewhat similar version to that, the Winnipeg Jets are in good shape. And I do think Salo is the type of asset that there is to get excited about. Gilbert does say halfway through the season, Salmanson will be the Morrissey and DeMello third pair. And that would probably be the ideal pathway where as DeMello, coming off what I think was his worst season of Winnipeg, ages, and he doesn't have the one thing with players, right? If you don't have an elite skill set, it's harder and harder to stay relevant in this league into your 30s. I do think DeMello as a third pairing D-man would be an ideal situation if Elias could become that guy.
So I guess I'm a little bit confused, though. So he's going to be on the top pairing now with Morrissey, but he's also not going to be given any opportunity because Scott Arniel.
No, I'm saying he's going to have to work his way up. He's not starting there.
No, but like halfway through the season, we think that they're going to change that drastically and Salmanson's going to be on the top pairing by. It's a tough, again, looking at, I can only go by what we've been shown already, right? I can't see into the future, but if I can look at the past and make a judgment, I don't see the Winnipeg Jets halfway through the season under Scott Arniel deciding that they're going to have a new top pairing. I don't see it.
Ooh, Bones. Also, Tony Salo would be their best skating Jet defender next year. And talk about a bit of a bump they could use. They had 3 of the 13 slowest guys in the league this year.
Yep.
I do think this is fair. And on your point, Mikey from Choices TK, the contracts and depth plus coaches, defense, to vets points to Salmanson not playing with a big club. 64 played, 63 games. Don't expect logic or merit-based system. Tony Valeri also points out those hard minutes are catching up to DeMello, and I think that is definitely more than fair based on what we saw this year.
Yep.
I want to transition as we move through this a little bit. Dylan Sandberg will get to, but I saw Bones 2020 was asking about Gabe Vilardi, saying, are we going to talk about Vilardi, his pace in the playoffs, and how I still don't trust him health-wise long-term? How do you feel about Gabe Vilardi's RFA situation right now, and what would you be looking to do here? I got a few different takes on this one.
So I think Vilardi's season overall was a fairly positive one outside of the injuries. you can't predict injuries. You never know when they're going to happen, who they're going to happen to, how severe they're going to be. Yeah, he's a guy that's been, banged up in the past. And you could tell he got a little bit annoyed with one of the questions today, right? When they asked him, I can't remember who it was. Somebody asked him, was it your back or your shoulder that you hurt? And he tried to dodge it a couple times, pretend like he didn't hear him. So they asked again, no, like your back or somebody else ended up trying to help. Yeah, no, was it your back or your shoulder? They're really, and he goes, it's not my back. And then just kind of stared. Right, because again, you don't want to be labeled injury prone. You don't want to be, constantly hurt. It's the same injury again. So you could tell he was a little annoyed at that question. Again, I think they're going to sign Gabe Vilardi. I think they're going to put a long-term contract on him. I think they like what they saw from him. I do. Yeah, I think they're going to be signing him. I think that's what they want. They want that top line to have consistency going forward. I don't know if that's the route I would honestly go down if I would go long term, just because maybe, again, have we seen the best of Gabe Vilardi? We might have already. But yeah, I do. I think they're going to be talking long term to him this summer. How about you?
I don't think they go long term.
Excellent.
I expect him to sign here, and I can't shake the idea that a 4-year deal is the sweet spot.
I like it.
It would bring him to getting a big deal on the open market at 29, 30 years old. If I'm Winnipeg, and I'll say this, I really enjoyed Gabe Vilardi's season ender today. Talk about a guy that does have some self-reflection on like both what he just did, but where he needs to go, where this team needs to go.
Yep.
Added in some humor with the in-laws there, which was funny. But when he was asked about getting to play with that top line and it being called by Kelly the best top line in the NHL, which just is not accurate. You saw Gabe really reflect on yeah, we had some like really great stretches, but we also had some real low ones too. And I don't care who I play with. I just want to play kind of thing, which I think this team could probably use a little bit more of. Yep. I don't want to decide who I play with. Let me just play. But it's an interesting one. I kind of view Gabe Vilardi as a really good gadget player where that net front, he's one of the best. I really enjoy watching him. Wears my favorite number too, which is a nice little touch. But I can't help but wonder, and Bones points it out with like the pacing and the injury history. I would avoid going long term for both of those reasons. It's going to be harder for him to keep pace into his mid-30s as it is, and that his injury history is very, very long, very, very long, and very, very documented. That I do worry about the wear and tear on a long-term deal. If I'm the Jets, I try and save some AAV there and go 4 years and make him earn that big UFA deal where he can go wherever he wants at 30. If you're looking to sign him. But I'll also say this, and this relates to the Kyle Connor contract or convo. We had a little back and forth with Mike about increasing the risk tolerance. If there's a change of scenery center or there's a big swing opportunity for a center, it's a hell of a headliner. It's a hell of a headliner that I'd be thinking about. Depending if you could keep Nick Ehlers. I would at least be considering it, man. We talked about it around the EP40 stuff when that came public in December.
Yep.
And I'm kind of back there. With Gabe.
Yeah, that's honestly a more, I think, realistic outcome than a Kyle Connor trade, right? So yeah, there is that opportunity that they could find a center, and Vilardi's got there was a lot of attention on the team overall, on that line nationally. As much as we like to point out that, yeah, they get a lot of credit for being the number one line, it's because they played together all fucking year. But they still did get a lot of attention for being, quote unquote, the number one line, right? So he's got some name value in terms of that right now. If you can find a center trade and you only have to really lose Gabe Vilardi as a headlining piece, I'm all for, going out and taking a shot at something like that. And he's not one of their draft picks, right? This isn't a guy that they've grown up and they've put the time and the effort into, right? So they're obviously going to be much more willing to look at something like that. With the success St. Louis had with doing some RFA poaching, do you think there's any opportunity that somebody comes in with an offer sheet for Gabe this year and Jets could take some picks?
That's an interesting one because I do think the Jets are in a good position not to worry about offer sheets. It's one of those things I don't feel like I'm really thinking too much about when it comes to Sandberg. The Jets would match anything. I don't think
Sandberg,
even
yeah,
Sandberg
they'd
would
match
bother.
anything. It's the Vilardi one.
I've seen more and more like other fan bases on social media really talking about it, and that means nothing. You're gonna want good players from other teams.
Of course.
And Gabe kind of talked today about the contract stuff working itself out. Chevy talked about it too. Like I expect the Jets and Velarde to come to a deal, but they're kind of in that PLD spot with them, and I do wonder what that looks like a little bit. I have no reason to believe he wouldn't stay. I think he made it very clear how much he enjoyed this year. Um, an offer sheet for him would be interesting because he'd probably be in that first and third round pick range. And I don't know if that's what you want back in this spot. But if it's a team that I think's not going to be good next year, I think I'll let them take Gabe Vilardi and take their first, potentially. I don't know. That's an interesting question. Do you think so?
I think if you're going to go that route and have somebody come in, give him an offer sheet, like you said, he'd be in that first and third range for sure. You would only want to do that if then you're going to still be aggressive in the market, right? You still need Ehlers signed, and then you need to use those picks to go out and get a, either the center replacement or, like make that big swing, whatever you need to do, but you need to be aggressive and you need to be creative with it. And again, those are just two qualities I don't think we're going to get, and I don't think the Jets even want to go down that route. It would just, again, with how much attention the St. Louis offer sheets got throughout the playoffs and things like that this year. I was curious what your thoughts are if you think anybody would maybe come knocking for Gabe.
I got one I want the Jets to be all over.
Which one?
I got two, but I don't think they'll be able to fit the other one because of the two trades of second-round picks for Brandon Tanev and Luke Shen, which is just hilarious right now to even think about. Can't go get a quality young player because he traded seconds for those bums, but whatever. Marco Rossi in Minnesota. Now, here's my running theory there. I've been a big Marco Rossi fan since the draft, and he was someone I was hoping for. He went one pick before Cole Perfetti. I was very happy to get Cole Perfetti. It was kind of between Rossi, Lundell, Perfetti that year, I remember. And it seems like Bill Guerin has not been that high on Marco Rossi for a couple of years now, and we finally saw that spill over in the exit interviews in Minneapolis. He was used as a fourth-line player in their final game, if I'm not mistaken. This was a 60-point center. Talk about a 2C. Bit small. But he's the type of shot that I think this org's going to need to take to not only find like a temporary solution at center, but a longer-term one that can then grow with, like, if Vilardi's sticking around, which we imagine he is, like, we're just hypothetically talking out of our ass right now, and Cole Perfetti's expected to stay here. Marco Rossi gives you a center in that age range as well, so that you have a growing core beneath the older ones that we're worried about aging out and this thing potentially falling off. My theory is there's going to be a team that offers sheets Marco Rossi if Guerin doesn't trade him by the draft. And I believe they would let him walk and take the picks and reinvest those picks in a style of player they're looking at. It's hard to imagine Minnesota trading Rossi to Winnipeg potentially, but if he makes it to that offer sheet stage, I think that's one where you can get in there, and it's one of those ones where you're offering a player that hasn't made a ton of money, quite a bit of money, to get him to move up to Winnipeg. I do think that's the type of situation that the Jets should be looking at. Maverick Bork out of Dallas was one I think would be in that second-round pick range to take a bit of a shot and also hurt Dallas's youth infusion and their cheaper contracts a little bit. That could be a guy that could bring some offense up the middle in Winnipeg. Think to my boy Ryan McLeod in Buffalo. They got so much business to take care of. Can you sneak in there and pull Ryan McLeod out of Buffalo? And there was one more I was really liking. Who was it?
Zero Ghost Ace asks JJ Paterka.
That one gets tough for me because I think he'll get a long number at a long-term deal at a big number from somebody, probably Buffalo. If you could trade for him, give me JJ Paterka if Nick Ehlers walks out the door. We talked about him a lot at the trade deadline. I just think when you're looking at offer sheets, St. Louis finally found the sweet spot. One thing like everyone's talked about the offer sheets just being this ghost. And a big reason why they've been a ghost is because everyone focuses on the name brand stars. And when you look at an offer sheet, you got to overspend on the AAV in term to get the other team to even move off the player.
Yep.
And then you're giving up multiple future unprotected first rounders. So with like the bigger players, unless you're getting a bona fide superstar that the team's not going to let walk, right?
Yeah.
You're taking on all the risk. Whereas when they've gotten into those mid-range guys like the Broberg and the Holloway, where you gave up a second and a third for legit NHLers with top 6 and top 4 ceilings, yeah, you're overspending the AAV a little bit, but the asset cost for that player level is great. Like the risk ends up working out both ways.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to imagine some of those bigger deals like an Evan Bouchard even. It'll cost 4 first rounders for teams to really want to take on all of that risk. But if you can get someone like Marco Rossi in here, that's an interesting spot and an interesting idea from Bones, actually. Vegas gets Rossi. Jets grab William Karlsson on the cheaper side. And if Karlsson was willing to come here, talk about a nice bridge to Braden Yager.
Yeah.
And he solves so much of the problems in the middle of the ice for the Winnipeg Jets. Now I want William Karlsson, Bones. Thanks for that one.
Yeah, you can sign me up for Wild Bill. That would be absolutely perfect. That's a great bridge to get to that next generation, and fills in the center issue that we've had pretty much every season, maybe minus 2 of them for the past 12 years.
Yeah, and choice of TK, you got to exploit teams with tight cap situations. That's what happened in Edmonton.
Yep.
The other name I was thinking about, I've seen him on some lists, but I have trouble seeing them move it. I believe they'll move off their older players to keep this guy around. Anton Lundell out of Florida with their cap situation might be a name to watch too. That could kind of fill that hole.
That would be an interesting one as well. I'd be shocked if, they do go down that road, though.
Gilbert Marion asks on this idea, can Yager be a future 2C? I see him as a 3C. He seemed to take the jumps you want to take, but if you could put yourself in a position where he comes in at some point and him and Lowry are your bottom 6 Cs because you've actually addressed that center hole, I think that's the spot you want to get to from an organizational depth spot, right? And I don't know. I don't want to put – he's definitely not going to be a 1C. I think his ceiling could be a 2C. I think a 3C is a safe bet. Like, I think he's a very projectable center. It's just how much of that ceiling is he going to get to?
Yep.
So that's a good question, Gilbert. That's a good question.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what you call a 2C, right? Is it the Winnipeg Jets version of a 2C that's, Vlad Nemestikov, who just will play with guys on that one? You know what I mean? Or do you mean, an actual like offensive, scoring type of player? I agree. His floor is a 3C. I think he'll be able to be an effective NHL player at the center position. Will we see that? Yeah, that offensive ceiling of getting to be an everyday second line productive center. I think a lot of it is going to come down to being put in the right position to succeed, given the right type of line mates. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see, because we don't have, I think, enough yet to say whether he can hit those heights. But it'll be interesting, and they're going to give him an opportunity to get there, I hope, because we only have the great Vlad Nemestikov for a couple more years.
Tony Valeri asks, how about Bennett? Too old or too much money? So I'll say this.
Both.
I respect, the right answer is both. I respect the hell out of Sam Bennett's game. I get why he's an attractive want.
Yeah.
I think he's someone that's going to fit in better with one of those teams that have like a top 10 1C, like a McKinnon.
Yes.
Potentially a Matthews, depending where you're at on him these days. Florida obviously makes sense with Barkov, but I think it's going to be hard for them to spend there. And I think Sam Bennett, because of the playoff stuff, is going to get such a number in term that it's not the guy. It's not the guy. I think some team's going to really regret that. They're going to enjoy what he brings, but this is a 50-point career high center. And some of the numbers that are coming out are pretty mind-blowing to me and I get why. He's getting the hype. He deserves the hype. I respect his game. It's just that's not where I doubt he'd come to Winnipeg anyways, but that's just not where you want to invest those free agent dollars, in my opinion.
I agree. The uncomfortable, the uncomfortable truth a little bit is, you kind of need to find a 2C who has the potential to still be your 1C offensive guy, because as much as we love Mark Scheifele, you still need somebody behind him that is going to be able to produce offensively at a high rate. He can't be. I still don't think he can be your absolute number one guy without that support on that second line of being just as good. You know, you need somebody at minimum who's going to give you that level of offense, and Sam Bennett's just not there.
Yeah, ideally something two-way, get some offense and still have that guy you could trust in matchups, and that's a hard thing. Every team needs those. Every team wants. Yeah,
that's a unicorn.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's
but
not
like
easy
said,
to do.
You need to get creative with it, right? That's where things like offer sheets and like things like that start to come into play. So the Jets are going to have to get creative if they want to fill that hole without tearing apart the roster.
I know Bones paid a lot of attention to Yager this year. In his opinion, Yager will be a solid 2C, not a high-scoring one, but a solid one.
Hell yeah,
Do we see like a Brian Little? Is that where we're kind of looking at Brayden Yager or Brian Little? Kevin K says Bennett will get that Chandler Stephenson deal, and the team immediately regrets it.
Good call.
And
yeah, that's a good call.
Seattle would love to get out of that one a year in.
Yup.
Bones also points this out, and this is where I wanted to go. So I'm glad we're on the same page on this one, because I know he was giving me shit earlier. I was going to make this comp, and I stopped myself. But Bones says, would Lowry have hit 50 points playing with either Connor or Ehlers all year? And I do believe so. I think Adam Lowry is a better center and can get more out of offensive players than a lot of this market seems to. And I think if Adam Lowry's here next year as the 2C, which would be a disappointment, Kevin Cheveldayoff should go address this hole. But that's where the tweak has to come, where you're playing Adam Lowry, who can play defensive and tough hockey, but he's also a really good support center that creates space for his wingers. And he's become a pretty sneaky good low-to-high passer that I think if you don't end up with a center, you have to give Adam Lowry offensive wingers next year to address that top six thing I was talking about earlier in the show. I do think he could get 50 points with offensive players. I do think we could talk about him like Sam Bennett if you saw him play with offensive players. And that's where the frustration for me was with not tweaking it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you can absolutely get 50 points out of him with the right wingers. And like the frustrating thing is, so with the guys that they have signed currently at the moment, if you kind of look at the situation that the Jets probably want to bring back as much of this roster as they possibly can going forward, maybe with the exception of like a Mason Appleton, which some of Chevy comments today leads me to believe that they're not going to prioritize a contract there. But for the most part, if the rest of your forward group is coming back intact, the Jets' best option, I think, would be to play Lowry in that second line center role with the offensive players and let Vlad play on a third or a fourth line. The frustrating thing is I don't know if that's the route that they're going to go. I think this coaching staff is probably going to look at Vlad again in that second line. And again, this is barring anything, barring a trade. If we hit with what we're going into it, I think they will look at Vlad in that spot again and Lowry back down with the quote unquote grinders on that third line. So, but yeah, that Lowry absolutely could be a 55 point player or a 50-point player with the right line mates.
Gilbert Marion asks, has Brock Nelson re-signed with Colorado? Maybe Chevy backdoors him, in which John Chan says, think Brock Nelson doesn't want to play in Canada and he is too old, Jets need to go younger. So it seems like that deal will not get done with Brock Nelson staying in Colorado. And I kind of said this at the deadline. I still believe this today. I was looking at Brock Nelson as a rental only. I would not give him the money in term he's going to get on the open market. And I agree with John Chan that you got to find someone older. I think you would be tying yourself to a tough contract on the decline if you gave Brock Nelson the deal I think he gets in the summer.
Yep, totally agree. I'm not going long-term or on any type of contract with Nelson. He would have been a great add at the deadline. Definitely could have, helped them out, maybe given them some ability to stretch the lineup out, get some more offense. But yeah, I don't want to be the team that gives him the big contract going forward.
Lucas Trapp says, was the rumor I saw about Eichel to New York fake then? There's been Eichel to the Rangers rumors since the Buffalo days. And when the Rangers finally had the chance to do it, they had about a dozen untouchables for whatever reason in that sad sack org that can't develop prospects to save their life. I mean, it's possible. Eichel was uncommittal on a contract in his Vegas end of year. But I have a real hard time seeing Vegas not get that done for their franchise center.
Yeah, Vegas will do everything they can to make sure he gets signed, even if that means, giving him extra money that they may have been a little bit hesitant on initially. But I don't see him getting out of there. Like you said, they had the opportunity to pick him up, and then they decided that 3/4 of the fucking team are untouchable, and all the prospects are untouchable. So I don't know what the fuck they thought they were doing.
And Turd Ferguson brings up my favorite. If you want to take on some risk tolerance and you want to shoot for the stars, if Quinn Hughes asks out of Vancouver, I imagine EP40 is very gettable. And I'll say this, the value has never been lower for a player that was just coached by Rick Tocchet. And Rick Tockett's history with offensive players is the type of players I'd want to bet on the low. And it's come out that he was dealing with 2 major injuries in the summer, which impacted his training. Hey, that's the type of bet I'd love to see. Don't see it happening, but EP40 would be high on my list of Jets swing for the fences. Turd.
Yeah, you want to,
as always.
You want to talk about going from an F to an A in terms of getting a grade. Chevy would very quickly, I think, change in your books there if he was able to get a deal that brings in EP40 for say like a Gabe Vilardi type headline.
Hey, I keep Chevy on a rotating scale, man. I'm never stuck in anything I said after Maurice left. It was his 3 best years.
Yep.
And then I said this year, in my opinion, was his worst year of his career. And he has an opportunity to change that narrative. Things are always evolving. He needs to have a big summer. We'll see where this goes. Any more thoughts on the way out tonight here?
No.
Oh, we got to do the three steps.
Oh, yes.
Turd suggested instead of three stars. We want to hear from you in the chat. This will be the From Financial Face-Off today. For the From Financial Face-Off, in the chat, we want to hear, what 3 things do you want to see the Winnipeg Jets learn from this season, potentially do this season, to come back next year, to have another shot at this? Let's move into it.
All right, let's do it.
Mikey, priorities this summer for the Winnipeg Jets. What are your 3 for the end of year special presentation of the landing strip?
All right. So number 1, I think going to be no surprise. Sign Nick Ehlers. Get him signed to a contract. You need him. You're already struggling for goals in your middle 6. You're unwilling to change your top line. If you lose Nick Ehlers, you're going to be walking out so much of your offensive production that you don't have it in-house right now to replace. You just don't have it. So that's number 1, sign Nick Ehlers. Number 2, do what you can to keep that coaching staff, because again, Scott Arniel's not going anywhere. We know that this is a long-term thing with him. Keep those assistant coaches in-house. Keep that number 1 power play. Find a way to, again, see if we can get a little bit creative. But if you can find a way to keep that coaching staff, I think it would go a long way in keeping the locker room happy, keeping the vibes going in Winnipeg, keep that positive image out in the league going out there. So, because I'm sure they're going to probably get some maybe some attention for some vacancies or in other places. So I'm going to say that's number 2. And number 3, this is the big one. Everybody goes on an ayahuasca retreat together. All the coaches, the management group, Mark Chipman, everybody. David Thompson can fly in if he wants. Everybody gets in, does a big ayahuasca trip. We just strip that ego down. We strip it all away. We get to see ourselves from that 300-foot view. And we can see where we can finally see where we can be flexible, where we can start to make those, more creative moves. I think that's going to go a long way in helping the Jets.
Yeah. Okay. Going to go through the chat a little bit here. Jacob Von Loy from Financial Faceoff is need a 2C who can score, play Helly less in the regular season and bringing our Danish king back. Adam Douglas is play young guys. Matty wins from Financial Faceoff 3 steps is a 2C, a top pair of right-handed D, and let's end the Logan Stanley experiment once and for all. Gilbert Marion's 3 steps are the big 2C, a big right-handed D-man, and trading Stanley for a bag of pucks. Dante Violet's from Financial 3 steps is yeet apples, Stan and Shen into the sun. Would be glorious not to watch any of them again. Bones' 3 steps are Jets need 3 to 4 new forwards up front with skill. 2 should be the young guys like Jaeger, Chibs, Reshevsky. Start Elias with JMO. And then 3 will somehow don't let Helly know when the playoffs start. Lucas Strapp says to your ayahuasca trip, shouldn't they do a pickerel fishing trip? Turd Ferguson's 3 steps are extend Ehlers, get a 2C, and get more talent on the third line, not apples. Adding a skilled D would be nice, but could be much more difficult in my opinion. Choices TKs are Chevy to be more proactive for a change, a 2C, and sign 27 and 54, who Scott Westman points out that we did not have a Sandberg chat. What do you expect Sandberg's contract to look like before I give my 3 steps on the way out?
Oh yeah, they'll. I for sure they're getting that. That's I think probably their number one priority in terms of the RFAs. So he's going to get signed. I think he'll get long term. Right,
you gotta go long term.
Yeah, they're not doing bridge. I'm hoping that they've learned from the Cole Perfetti thing, and they're not going to mess it up. How about you?
I think they go long term. I think they go long term. I think they go 7-8 years. Somewhere in the 6-7 range. Sound about right? Like, the interesting thing with Sandberg is he doesn't have the archetype to get the big number, but he also got all the praise down the stretch, the attention. Everyone knows his value, that he's basically Winnipeg's Slavin Light. That I have trouble pinpointing that extension. Like 8 times 6, sign me up. And we're seeing Gilbert Marion, he's getting $6 million a year.
Yep.
Adam Douglas, 8 years, $6 million.
I was thinking 6.5, so I think we're all right in the same ballpark right now. Yeah,
would be fantastic. I will celebrate that contract and what he means to this org for many years to come. But yeah, I expect them to get that long term. If they go short term on him, I think that's a bit of a mistake.
Yeah, I don't think
on their part.
I don't think they're going to screw that one up. I think they know that they need him long term. They're happy with him. That's their guy. That's their draft pick. So yeah, I think they're going to get him the 8 years, and I had 6.5. So I think we're all kind of right in the ballpark here.
And as you kind of talked about with Vilardi wanting consistency on the top line for this org, and this org liking to lock things in, I think they'll want to lock in that second pair together, and they gave Pionk 7 years, so maybe it comes out to 7 times 6.
Yep.
But I expect that one to be long term. Three steps for me. 3 steps for me. Number one has to be Connor Hellebuyck and figuring out what it's going to take to unlock the playoff aspect of it. I mean, at the end of the day, he is this team's MVP. He's their most important player, and he needs them to. This team needs him to be that MVP in the playoffs. So whether that's talking to the right psychologists, whether that's playing less games next year and letting Comrie get some runway, I do think there is something to be said with the Jets establishing themselves as a consistent playoff team now, as a consistent threat, that you could work through the regular season a little bit more than they did. They went balls to the wall. Didn't try things, didn't really do much. That I do think they've earned that trust that, hey, they're going to have some down spells. And if you're using that to potentially rest Hellebuyck, if you're using that to try new combinations, something I'd like to see. But I think number one has to be making sure Connor Hellebuyck is absolutely right for the playoffs. Has to be number one. Good point here, actually, on Bones. Slavin just signed last year for 6.3 last year. So Sandberg probably in that 5.5 to 6 range. Then I forgot that he had gone that new
he
deal
just signed.
just last year.
Okay.
I had forgotten he had just gone that deal. So shout out Bones. Thanks for sharing that.
So yeah, get that 6x8 done, and let's go.
Yes, that works. That's a great ad. Great ad. Number 2 priority has to be landing a 2C. Has to be. I think everyone knows they need a right-handed D and a 2C. I think it's going to be a lot to get both. I think the defensive structure and the fact we do have Connor Hellebuyck, at least for the regular season, allows them to get away with that there a bit more. And maybe Salo changes things for them. And if Salo doesn't, maybe there's room to move at the deadline. But a 2C that's going to allow this roster to deepen by just adding that player in it. And the third is, as I kind of talked about, I'm hoping the org learns from the road woes and what it's meant in the playoffs, that they do have to re-envision what this top 9 looks like to get more depth throughout it. And I think that they really have to go somewhere that they've refused to go and really try and see what this Winnipeg Jets team looks like with Kyle Connor on his own line and Mark Scheifele on his own line. If both players are as good as we think they could be, I don't see a reason why that should be such a foreign ground. Every time I suggest it on social media, people want to send me to the goddamn gulag. Mm-hmm. But if you look around the league, some of the best teams in the world have 2 of their best players driving lines, and guess what? They'll still have power play success together.
Yep.
Guess what? You could still load them up down the stretch.
Yep.
So I guess what I'm looking for is more creativity out of the coaching staff. The fact that you were that nimble and you couldn't adjust to what DeBoer was doing and getting Rantanen out for extra shifts with guys like Ehlers, Connor, Scheifele, and finding minutes in easier competition. I want to see some flexibility and creativity to get more offensive looks from the Winnipeg coaching staff that we just have not seen in this organization for some time. And I got one more to read out here from Julian, who joined late, saying, I joined late, but a 2C is a must, maybe even a 1C to move Scheifele down to 2C, and Salo is going to get screwed with no room to crack the top 6. Helly has to play 55 games max, and next season is an Olympic year. So a lot of us on the same page with the needs to move forward. This is a big summer for the Winnipeg Jets organization, and I look forward to chatting with you as the offseason goes. We'll probably figure out some live shows on the day's news drop, if not the next day. Hey, Mikey, that probably sounds right.
Absolutely, yep.
And we'll make sure we do those shows live so we can get your takes. I think the secret sauce to what this show has become is the fact that we get to build this community and get to share everyone's thoughts and debate them and go over the good, go over the bad. So we'll go live as moves happen. We're going to do 2 shows after my trip. That'll be me blind reacting. So if you want to call in and leave us a voicemail on your ideas for the Winnipeg Jets offseason, Mikey, what is the number again?
1-204-800-0409. Get on the line, 1-204-800-0409. We'll open up the voicemail box tomorrow and let us know your Jets takes for the offseason.
And Mikey will set that all up. We'll do a bit of a reaction video to that. And if things happen over the next 2 weeks and I could stay off my phone and not see them, we'll do a blind reaction of my immediate finding out the news and rumors. We'll add rumors in there because I love rumor season.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Gilbert, who says, have a great trip, Nick. Kiss the Blarney Stone. I'll have to add that to my itinerary. So I got to say, I did that Texas trip on a bit of a whim, and then I didn't book my flight until Tuesday to Ireland. I have nothing planned. I'm going in blind. I kind of want to experience Ireland at its core and really learn and just be a part of it. There's a couple trips or tours I'm looking at booking for some things that are a little bit out. But I'm really looking forward to kind of just learning about my family history and learning about that country. So now I know Blarney Stone is something I got to do because I'm going in real blind. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. I want to thank everybody for being a part of this show today, whether you're listening to it later, whether you were here in the chat, whether you're listening to this down the line. What we were able to do and build with this community this year has been one of the coolest and most fun experiences I've been a part of. The fact you all show up and want to be a part of this. Honestly, I've talked about it a few times. This was probably the hardest year of my life personally, and this show and getting to build this community and get to do this with all of you has not only been a distraction, it's been a real prideful thing for me as we continue to try and grow and keep this thing going. We want to keep bringing more content, maybe, just maybe, in the next year or two. It leads to a Monday to Friday show with the post-game show. We'll see. That's where my ambitions lie. But the fact that all of you have decided to spend time listening to this, being a part of this, sharing in this, wishing me well during my tough times, it's really meant a lot for me after putting myself into this. And I can't thank you all enough for being here every step of the way. I hope everyone has a great summer. I hope the Winnipeg Jets and Kevin Cheveldayoff have a much better next 12 months than the last 12 months. And I'm looking forward to seeing where this all goes and being a part of this roller coaster with all of you. We will see you in a couple weeks.
Right on. Good night, everybody.